Hello, listeners out there. Welcome to Beauties and Beasts, a podcast about all things Beauty and the Beast. So in the last episode, we talked about Beaumont's original story of Beauty and the Beast and what makes a Beauty and the Beast story. Now we're going to talk about one of its many sources. If you'll remember what I said in the last episode, stories of beasts falling in love with beauties, also known as the animal bride myth, date as far back as ancient Greece. Gods like Zeus, who had no commitment to their wives, would transform into animals and carry off mortal women because I really don't understand why men do this. Other creatures who weren't necessarily immortal would also be desiring and kidnapping mortal brides as well, such as the monster Achelous in the Hercules myth. But the most famous god times mortal romance is the romance of Eros and Psyche. If you're not very familiar with Greek mythology, you may be wondering, Eros and Psyche? Who the heck are these people? Actually, you know one of them. You see, Eros is the Greek god of love. And later on, when all the Greek gods were adopted by the Romans, his name was changed to Cupid. That's right, this is a story about that winged baby in the diaper. Actually, he doesn't wear a diaper. It's more of a loincloth. There is a difference. Diapers didn't really exist back in ancient Greece. Or ancient Rome, for that matter. Now, the funny thing about Cupid is that even though we see him everywhere on Valentine's Day, we actually don't know that much about him. I mean, Santa and Frosty get all these bedtime stories and Christmas carols, but we don't get that for Cupid, even though he's apparently a big symbol for this arbitrary greeting card holiday that falls on a birthday of a Catholic saint. And we're using a Roman god for this. For instance, did you know that Cupid had a wife? And the story of Eros, and I'm going to say Eros because I like to keep to the original Greek names, and how he met his wife had been passed down orally for centuries. So it's hard to determine exactly when the story first came up. The first written form was not in Greek, but in Latin, in the 1st century CE, by Apuleius, in a chapter of his novel, The Golden Ass. By ass, I mean donkey, of course. Get your mind out of the gutter. And like Beaumont's tale, there have been variations in the story, so I'm just going to summarize as best I can, mostly referring to Apuleius' version, and some details from other versions. But before I get into the summary, I'd like to thank my very first Dragon Prince, that's $15 patron, Anime Guy 1101. Thank you very much for your support. And remember that true beauty comes from the kindness you show unto others, and your kindness will not go unrewarded. To know what I mean, look at the patron-only episode I uploaded a few days ago. Alright, so in the last episode we established that most Beauty and the Beast stories follow a structure of 5 acts. And like in the last episode, I'm going to be summarizing the story according to these 5 acts. Act 1, Introduction of the Characters. Once upon a time, back in ancient Greece, a king and queen had 3 daughters who were all very beautiful, though the youngest, Psyche, was the most beautiful of the 3. If you listened to the last episode, this is already sounding familiar, huh? Psyche was so beautiful that people from far and wide worshipped her and said that she is more beautiful than Aphrodite, also known as Venus, the goddess of beauty. And as you may have guessed, Aphrodite was listening in on this, and she was very, very jealous. One thing you learn in Greek mythology is that you should never say that anyone or anything is better than a certain god. It's not going to end well for anybody. In order to take revenge on Psyche, Aphrodite sends her winged son Eros, the god of love, to shoot one of his arrows at Psyche. Okay. Having his name be Eros and having him shoot arrows is going to be confusing. And Aphrodite tells Eros to be certain that the one Psyche falls in love with upon being shot by the arrow will be some horrible, hideous monster. That'll show her. A little bit about Eros' character. He's pretty juvenile and seen as a mischief maker, causing trouble among the gods and upsetting marriages. Not exactly the most responsible and serious of gods. Apparently, he's the reason that Zeus cheats on Hera all the time. Yeah, he's the reason. Sure. Keep telling yourself that, Zeus. Then we go into Act 2, how beauty comes into contact with the beast. So Eros, following his mother's wishes, comes into Psyche's room while she sleeps. And he's about to shoot her with one of his arrows when she suddenly turns around and he sees her face. He is so startled by her beauty that he scratches himself with one of his arrows. I'm pretty sure you all know what happens when you're struck by one of Cupid's arrows. You fall in love with the first thing you see. And so Eros takes off before Psyche can wake up. Time goes by, and Psyche starts to grow miserable. Her sisters have gotten married, but nobody asks Psyche for her hand. Probably because they are just so intimidated by her beauty. Or personality. And so her father, the king, goes to consult the oracle and asks if his daughter will ever marry. The oracle's response, and quoting from Apuleius' book, albeit an English translation, "Dress Psyche for a funeral, and leave her on the mountaintop. Her husband will no human be, but a winged snake, a monster so fierce that even the gods are afraid of him." This wasn't the news the king and queen expected. But unfortunately, because of certain people like Oedipus, you need to comply with the oracle. Psyche complies with the oracle too, because she feels she deserves this fate for causing envy with her beauty. Okay, Psyche, it wasn't any of your fault. You weren't the one who said you were more beautiful than Aphrodite. Okay, seriously, this isn't the only time that a girl gets punished because somebody else said she was more beautiful than a certain goddess. So Psyche's wedding ceremony is more like a funeral, as the procession leaves her on a mountaintop with melancholy music and black clothing, and everybody is weeping. I know some people think marriage is the end of the world, but yikes. And so we go into Act 3, the interaction between the beauty and the beast. When Psyche is left alone on the mountaintop and the procession leaves, she falls asleep and then awakes inside a beautiful palace. In some versions, Zephyrus, god of the west wind, whisks her away to the palace. Either way, she gets there magically. She hears voices from invisible servants who tell her that she is the lady of the house, and all the riches there are hers, and they are at her beck and call. This sound familiar yet? As for her husband, he visits her that night, but she cannot see him, and he makes love to her, consummating their marriage. Whoa, hold on. Is this right? I mean, did you ask her before slipping into her bed? Yeah, I like the clean version where this part doesn't happen. He still comes into her room at night, but without the making love part. And night after night, she starts growing accustomed to her invisible lover, and slowly falls in love with him. After having sex with him every night, though never actually seeing him, or knowing his name. You can understand why I have a few problems with this. Anyway, they're happy for a while until Act 4, the betrayal. Like I said, this happens a lot in Beauty and the Beast stories. Psyche becomes pregnant with her husband's child. And she is happy about this, but she starts missing her sisters and demands that she see them. Her husband at first refuses, saying that your sisters will try to turn you against me, and will try to persuade you into figuring out what I look like, and then you will lose me forever. But Psyche goes, "But it's not fair. I never get to see you, and I am alone all day. You only come to me at night to have sex. Don't I get to talk to other people?" So her husband complies with her, and the god of the west wind brings Psyche's sisters to the palace. They see the palace, and all the riches Psyche has, and start to grow jealous because they are in very terrible marriages themselves. You can see where Beaumont got her ideas from. They ask about Psyche's husband. At first she tries making up a story that he is out hunting. But then eventually, after much peer pressure, she finally admits that she has never actually seen her husband. The sisters take advantage of this, and with a wicked idea say, "Oh, our dear sister, you are in great danger. Your husband must be a great snake like the oracle said, and he will devour you and your unborn child." Okay, let's take this back a bit. She sleeps with him every night, right? I mean, she can tell that he's not a snake, right? That he's at least humanoid, right? Look, I may have never had sex, but you can tell, right? And so her sisters give her an oil lamp and a knife, so that she may see her husband when he's asleep, and if he's a monster, kill him. Wow, this took a dark turn. So that night, Psyche waits until her husband is fast asleep, and uses the oil lamp to see him better, and then discovers that he is indeed Eros, the god of love himself. Plot twist! Although if you're wondering what the oracle meant by saying that he's a winged snake, well, he's a snake as in sneaky, and you know he has wings. And the gods fear him because they can make him fall in love. Anyone who can manipulate the gods is worth fearing. Psyche then accidentally pricks herself on one of his arrows and falls in love with him even more, and then starts feeling ashamed of herself for not trusting her husband. And she is so entranced she doesn't notice that oil is dripping from the lamp, and it drips right onto Eros, waking him up. Eros sees her and the knife and goes, "You meant to kill me! I went against my mother's wishes and made you my wife, and you didn't trust me? You couldn't tell that I wasn't a monster when we made love?" It's not really clear why he hides his identity to Psyche. I have a couple of theories. One of them is that he didn't want his mom to find out, and the fewer who knew the better, including his own wife. Or maybe he just wanted her to love him not as a god, but as a person. I kind of like the second one better. Though the first one does make sense too. Feeling betrayed, Eros takes off through the window, leaving Psyche in a pile of despair. It does not end here. So we're kind of on the borderline of Act 5, the resolution, which, I'm warning you, is very, very long. So Psyche wanders the world in search of her husband and comes across her sisters. And she tells them, "Hey, my husband turned out to be Eros, the god of love, but he dumped me and said he would take one of you in my place. Just jump off that cliff there and the winds will carry you." Wow, Psyche, that's straight up murder. Forgive me for thinking that you're an innocent heroine. And while Psyche is searching for Eros, Aphrodite hears about their little affair from a seagull, and so she locks her son up as punishment. Psyche arrives at Aphrodite's temple and pleads for her husband. And Aphrodite goes, "Think I'll pity you because you're pregnant? Technically, a ceremony never took place, so your baby will be a bastard. Besides, my son's a god. You're just a mortal. It will never work out." However, Aphrodite decides to have some fun and humiliates Psyche even more. "Okay, maybe I'll let you visit my son if you do these little tasks for me." The first task she has Psyche do is to separate these grains according to kind before nightfall, which is, of course, impossible. If you've read the Brothers Grimm version of Cinderella, this will sound familiar. And while Psyche is hopelessly trying to separate these tiny little grains that are all mixed up, a group of ants take pity on her and separate the grains for her. I know you may say this was cheating, but hey, there was no way she would have been able to do all that by nightfall. Aphrodite returns, sees all the grains sorted, and says, "There's no way that you did this by yourself, so this doesn't count." Aphrodite's second task is for Psyche to bring wool from a flock of golden sheep across the river. But seeing how restless the sheep are, Psyche sees this task as hopeless, and she tries to drown herself in the river. However, a non-specific river god, or enchanted reed, depending on the version you read, stops her and tells her how she can get the wool. The sheep will be aggressive, so she must wait until they fall asleep in order for her to get the wool that are caught on the briars. She does exactly this, but Aphrodite says, "Okay, I know you had help, so stop cheating, okay?" The third task is for Psyche to collect a jar of water from deadly rivers that feed into hell. An eagle helps her, knowing the waters are dangerous. Yeah, this task is often left out of later versions, which is probably why this doesn't go into much detail. And Aphrodite says, "Geez, girl, can't you do anything by yourself?" And so for the final task, which is the most dangerous, Psyche must go to the Underworld and ask Persephone, the queen of the Underworld, for a little of her beauty. "All this despair over my son has run me down. I've been taking care of those wounds left by the oil lamp wax that you inflicted upon him. You know, Psyche, you could really use it. You look pretty awful right now." And Psyche, thinking the only way to go to the Underworld is to die, prepares to jump off a building. Sheesh, this girl needs a therapist. The tower speaks to her because apparently everything in this myth has sentience, going, "Whoa, stop! There's no going back from suicide! Here, I know a shortcut!" The tower tells her to go to a hill in Sparta, bring 2 gold coins for which to pay the boatman Charon for the trip across the river Styx there and back, and 2 barley cakes for which to distract the 3-headed guard dog Cerberus. The tower also says, "Ignore the dead spirits that will tempt you, and do not eat anything there, and whatever you do, no matter how curious you are, do not look in the box with Persephone's beauty inside." Okay, if you know the story of Pandora's box, you know how this is gonna go. Psyche does all this, but as she is returning to Aphrodite, she takes a good look at herself and see how worn out she is from doing all these tasks. And she's been doing all this while pregnant, too. That is commitment. Thinking her husband will not want to see her while she is looking so, well, not so pretty, She decides to open the box and take a little bit of the beauty, which of course you know is the exact opposite of what she was told to do. So when she opens the box, the divine beauty is apparently so dangerous for mortals that she passes out. Meanwhile, Eros, whose wounds from the wax have healed, escapes Aphrodite's prison and finds Psyche. He wakes her up and then goes straight to Zeus and tells him the whole situation. Zeus responds with, "I don't know, man. You've made me cheat on my wife hundreds of times." Yeah, sure, it's his fault. "But I suppose I could do you this favor because you two look pretty cute. On the condition that, just, next time you meet a hot mortal chick, you're gonna have to introduce me to her." Okay, seriously, if this is your response, I'm kind of doubting that Eros is the reason behind your infidelity. Take responsibility for your actions, man. And so, after Zeus gives Aphrodite a strong talking to, Eros and Psyche are married. And Psyche is given ambrosia to drink to make her immortal. And then their daughter Hecate is born, who becomes the goddess of pleasure. Alright, so if you were here for the first episode, you would have noticed that this Greek myth and Beaumont's fairy tale from the 18th century of Beauty and the Beast carry quite a few similarities. They involve 3 sisters, the youngest being the most beautiful and unmarried. The beauty character, through no fault of her own, has some dreaded fate thrown upon her after she puts on a selfless act. Like I said, Psyche never said that she was more beautiful than Aphrodite, and Belle didn't exactly ask her father to steal the rose. She asked for a rose, but not for him to steal it. And the beauty character is pampered by a mysterious nightly visitor, and the sisters lead her to betrayal. But of course, there are some differences. For one thing, Eros is not a monster, at least physically, but a god. And yet both of these stories portray unequal marriages. Beauty and the Beast features a relationship between a peasant girl and an aristocrat, and Eros and Psyche is a relationship between a mortal and immortal. Either way, they're both kind of parallel differences in social classes. I mean, think about it. In ancient Greece, it would have been very unheard of for, say, a royal to marry a peasant. Same as in the 18th century, where peasants and aristocrats don't normally intermarry either. An important thing to note is that Eros and Psyche is one of the few instances in ancient Greek mythology where a mortal and immortal couple ends happily in marriage. Another one being Arachne and Dionysus. Most of the time when a god falls in love with a mortal, the mortal gets tragically killed or turned into a cow or a tree. Yeah, it doesn't usually end well. Another difference between Eros and Psyche and Beauty and the Beast is that Eros and Psyche provides more character development for the male lead as well as the female lead. Both characters mature as the story progresses, while Beaumont's fairy tale is more about feminine maturation for Belle. Eros is described as mischievous and irresponsible. You know, a guy you wouldn't expect to do anything worthwhile other than just drive people crazy by making other people fall in love. Randomly, it would seem. But then towards the end of the story, he becomes grounded in his newfound family, taking responsibility as a husband and a father. I mean, just think about it. When he first falls in love with Psyche, his solution is to pamper her in any way he can. And the minute that she betrays him, he reacts really badly and just decides, okay, it's over for us, instead of talking it over like mature adults should. And I believe the wounds that are caused by Psyche's oil lamp serve as a symbol for Eros' feelings towards Psyche. He is hurting from her betrayal, but by the time the wounds heal, he goes to Psyche's rescue and decides to forgive her for her betrayal. Some versions of the story say that Eros sent all those talking animals and plants to help her. It shows how far he's come, how he's going out of his way to help her, not just pampering her and having sex with her. Finally realizing that being there for your spouse doesn't mean just being there, if being invisible is being there at all. You've got to be there for the good and the bad. Psyche becomes more than just a stereotypical princess waiting at home for her Prince Charming to come. When her Prince Charming leaves, she goes out and she fights for him in every way that she can, and also kind of becomes suicidal and self-conscious along the way. Eros and Psyche also shows a reversal of Belle's attachment to her father, and is instead showing a maternal connection of Eros' attachment to his mother. Yeah, I'm afraid I'm going to have to reference Freud here as much as I regret it. But according to Freud, men tend to favor their mothers and women their fathers. And, well, based on what I've witnessed in my own family, that tends to kind of be true. I don't know about the sexual attachment, though. But both Beauty and the Beast and Eros and Psyche are all about a child breaking from their attachment to the parent of the opposite sex to the attachment to their spouse, which is what most people have to go through when they get married. Eros gains independence from his mother and starts making his own decisions. Psyche also gained some independence, though she did have help from those tasks, yet they were impossible. She still has some agency. I mean, it was kind of her idea to trick her sisters into jumping off that cliff. But what this myth mostly means to me personally is that this is a story about trusting your spouse. It shows what happens in a relationship without trust. And this is something Eros and Psyche had to develop on both ends. Eros did not trust Psyche to reveal his identity. And in turn, Psyche did not trust Eros that he might be keeping his identity a secret for a reason, though he really should have told her. But she also did not trust that he would still love her if she was not beautiful, even after she went through all that crap. The myth also contains a pretty realistic portrayal of a couple's first fight. I mean, all the god and magic stuff aside. When Psyche and Eros have their first disagreement, they do not bother talking things over, or rather Eros doesn't. Eros just flies out the window, which is probably why the last act is so long, because in a relationship, it may take a while for the spouses to forgive each other after something so big, because that is what happens in a relationship. Couples fight, and they may not talk for a little bit, but the strong couples, they pull through it in the end. And both spouses in this story prove devotion and determination to each other, which sets it apart from Beauty and the Beast in a way that I like. Because Beauty and the Beast was really more about Belle proving herself as a devoted partner to the Beast, and the Beast just kind of sat in the wings, waiting for her to finally accept him. The myth also shows ways not to prove yourself. Psyche attempted suicide a lot of times, but she was also stopped, which just goes to show, no matter how much you love someone, don't die over it. There are better ways to cope with loss. You have to be able to trust that your partner will love you despite your flaws. Although, let's be real. You may not want to spill all of your secrets on the very first date. Just, do it when you're comfortable telling them. Though, maybe before your first time in bed, just saying, Eros. So the moral of this story is, trust in your partner, suicide is never the answer, and if someone tells you not to open a box, do not open it! Alright, so earlier I mentioned that I've received sponsorship from my very first patron. You see, unlike my work on YouTube, this is my first time trying to earn money from my creative audio work. Which is why I set up a Patron Program, in which patrons can pledge a certain amount of money once a month to fund production of this podcast and earn special rewards in return. So what will this money be used for? First of all, I have to pay off my membership dues. Yeah, Podbean isn't entirely free. And I have to be able to save up for soundproofing equipment so that my podcast can be in higher quality. Oh, by the way, I'd like to thank two of my friends in the Brony fandom, Magpie Pony and The Lost Narrator, for offering me their old mic and pop filter. So that's one less thing I have to raise money for. I also have to fix my external hard drive, which had literally crashed several months ago, and has a lot of my old files on it. It's still in the shop, but when they do find the right parts, the cost to fix it will be over $600. Yeah, I really want to be able to pay that off. And finally, in the longer run, I have to be able to pay off my student loans, which is like thousands of dollars and a lot. If you'd like to help fund this podcast, keep it going, and help me reach these goals, the Patron Program currently has 6 different rewards packages, and these rewards are subject to change. First, there's the Frog Prince package, and these are patrons of $1 a month or more. In return for your support, you will receive a thank you on the show or site, a thank you email, access to patrons-only comments, and access to new episode previews. That's right, only patrons will get episode previews. Second is the Snake Bride package, for patrons of $5 or more. You'll get all the previous rewards, your name listed on the show's patron list and a shoutout on the show, as well as early access to new episodes, no less than 3 days before the public upload. The third is a Phantom Lover package, for patrons of $10 or more a month. You'll get all the previous rewards mentioned, as well as access to patron-only bonus content, and the ability to participate in a closed fan Skype group with the hosts. And I'm going to try to record my episodes while on a Skype call, so you guys will be able to listen in on my recording, before it's edited and uploaded. The Dragon Prince package is for patrons of $15 a month or more, and that was the type of patron I mentioned earlier. You'll get all previous rewards, you'll be able to read a short message on the show, or call in as a special guest, You'll receive a free 30-minute video conference with me, the host. You can determine a show topic, and it will definitely be made. And you'll receive a complimentary Beauties and Beasts mug or journal/notebook. Well, you'll have to choose one of these. The beauty package of $20 a month or more, you will receive all previous rewards, you can appear as a guest on the show, and a 60-second sponsorship of your product or service read by me, the host, and 2 of the following, a complimentary mug or journal/notebook or shirt/dress. Finally, in the True Beauty package of $30 a month or more, you'll receive all previous rewards, choose a guest for the show and be allowed to attend the recording of that show, receive a personal thank you video from me, the host, a 90-second sponsorship of your product or service read by me, a 1-hour video conference with me, and 3 of the following, a complimentary mug or journal/notebook or shirt/dress, or bag or pillow or laptop/tablet skin. Please note that even if you prefer not to fund this podcast, you'll still be able to listen to the regular episodes for free. If you cannot make a monthly commitment but would still like to support this podcast financially, you can buy Beauties and Beasts merchandise for sale on Redbubble right now. I'll leave a link on the post. Remember that true beauty comes from the kindness that you show others. On the next episode, 2 Thursdays from now, we will explore the world of Scandinavian folklore in the old legend of the Bride of the Lindorm King. See you in 2 weeks!